Okay, Madam Chair, we have a quorum and we're ready to begin if you are.
Sounds good. It is 1:33 and we will call this meeting to order and start by doing roll call. Myrna is filling in for, I think you're replacing Jason James, so welcome, Myrna.
Thank you. And yes, I'm here. Hi.
Yes, thanks. Anne,
Yeah, Ann Dunno, Capital Project Manager with Mountain Line. And Myrna, what is your role at ADOC?
I am a regional planner, so I am taking care of Metroplan, Simpo, and NACOG.
Right.
So,
thank you.
yes. So yeah, Jason was promoted and I took his place.
Right. Thanks, Myrna.
Brendan Foley. Not present. Nate Reisner. Also not present. Jess McNeely.
Hi, I'm here.
Michelle McNulty, I'm here. Jeff Bowman.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Okay, and Ed.
Good afternoon, Ed Stillings with Federal Highway Administration.
Thanks, everybody. Do we have any, Jeff, do I keep going through everything or do you do that? Or I'm sorry, Miles?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, for chairing this as vice chair. And yeah, I know that we don't have anything for public comment. So if you would like to go to item D, approval of minutes, that would be great.
Great. If everybody's had a chance to review the minutes of our meeting on September 28th, 2022, is there a motion to approve?
Michelle, this is Ann. I'll move to approve.
Great. In a second?
This is Jeff. I'd like to second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Everybody that wants to approve, say aye.
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 Anyone who does not want to approve, say nay. Cool. Looks like we are approved with unanimous consent. Okay, it doesn't look like we have anything on the consent agenda item.
That's correct.
Okay. Moving on to general business. Looks like we have an update from Miles and David Wessel on Stride Forward updates.
We do. Madam Chair, members of the TAC, I'm gonna open this briefly and then turn it over to Dave, and just say we have had a lot of progress with Stride Forward. You all received a detailed update and the same PowerPoint presentation that we've been sharing with the public through our virtual public meetings for the past month. I know there's a request from TAC members for the detailed report with all the documentation that you can review prior and having it in a timely way before it goes to the board to request their adoption. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to give you some updates on how that part of it is going and our current schedule. Dave?
Thank you, Miles. Yeah, so you can see the staff report is up. Our target for having this adopted was the end of this year. And to deliver those technical details, we are going to require more time to pull all those together. So a number of the financial details, on a per project basis, need some review. The accessibility analysis Now that I'm happy to report the new model is now working and we should be able to move ahead with that, but we're just now able to move ahead with that. So we're going to have to take some more time, and we're looking to extend this into the spring. The report here says April 6th for adoption. I believe we can shoot for March. An April timeframe gives us some more leeway and contingency, but I'll be meeting with Miles. You may not have realized, but he was out of country actually for a couple of weeks, and we haven't had a chance to discuss this in detail. So I guess I'll pause there before I go into the rest of the presentation, see if there's any questions regarding time frame. Hearing none, I'll just say that we don't anticipate any change in policy, which I'm about to present, or the overall direction of the onward and upward scenarios. So I'm going to share my screen and go into a presentation here. On the policy, I want to present two things to you today. An overview of the policies, and then an overview of the public involvement to date, not necessarily outcomes of that. We'll put that off till next month, but just to give you a sense of the extent to which we've done this. So there's what we want to talk about with you today. This is from that presentation Miles mentioned. We have the onward plan and the upward concept, which you are all familiar with. We use community design, transportation investments, and travel, demand management to reach the carbon neutrality goals, shooting for about 460,000 miles reduction, and we achieve that. Part of the way we do that in the community design aspect of this is to shift 50% of growth into these two focus areas, downtown and 4th Street. I'll put a qualifier on this, even though we reviewed several concepts and arrived at this as the most effective. The upward concept is a suggestion in terms of how to pursue or achieve carbon neutrality goals. And we will be taking this into the regional plan process by the city and the county, which will make a final determination on the land use plan. In that presentation, we talk about the goals, or how to reach those goals in terms of investment in transit service and pedestrian and bicycle facilities, as well as travel demand management. And as you see here and can recall, it's a pretty hefty price tag. I do this review because it does have influence on the policies. And as we were going through the policies, I believe this was really a suggestion that came from Kate Morley at Mountain Line, that she saw really two overarching policies, and we've added a third. One is, as you know, Onward will be our base plan. It is fiscally constrained. Meaning that these are the revenues we expect to have, or reasonably expect to have available. That doesn't stop our community, MetroPlan or its community members from pursuing upward through other means available. That could be the private development process. It can be grants. So there are a number of things available to us that we can pursue, even though they're not, fiscally available at this time. So that wouldn't be an overarching policy. The other two really have to do with prioritizing bicyclists, pedestrians, and transit users. So one, in the design of our transportation system, and two, in the design of our community. So this really gets to that transit-oriented design, application of density, and connectivity. So what I want to do now is go through some of the policies, highlight them like I've done here, where I see them as either maybe controversial or a fair departure from the onward policies. And as a reminder, we produced the onward policies as kind of a unification of multiple plans, and have reviewed those a couple of times now with multiple, staff from multiple agencies, as well as some city staff. We feel that the onward policies are fairly reflective of current policy. So what you're going to see are the upward policies. So again, should our member agencies wish to pursue this, these are policies that we would recommend. And they do repeat, the onward policies that we would move forward intact. Those are repeated here. Many of the upward policies were amplifying onward efforts. So not going to go through all of them, but just those that, again, we thought had a fairly significant departure. So requiring electric vehicle charging and capabilities. Right now, I believe there's a building code in the city that would give the capacity for this. This is really bumping that up to the city and county. This one, acquiring right-of-way well in advance of project construction to help control costs. And here's the kind of the big two tied to that overview I just gave, really seeking revenue for transit and the ped and bike infrastructure. So I'm going to pause every few slides and see if anybody has questions or comments. So I'm pausing now. Any questions or comments? And I can't see, well, I guess I can go back up and see if there's anybody have their hand raised. Nothing at this time. Okay. So here, this one, expanding these networks into existing and future urban and suburban neighborhoods. So this is, what we've discussed about retrofitting neighborhoods, development, redevelopment in urban areas, adding or creating a street network with small blocks. So really pushing that connectivity in those areas. An essence of equitability in terms of looking at maintenance operations decisions, enhancing or maintaining access, equitable access, adding a curb management program. Just a comment that, the city in particular is really doing quite a lot of this in the downtown already. This is just, kind of putting that into a written statement. Working at a unified signal coordination program and trying to do that every 3 years, and really making transit signal priority and bicycle detection part of that practice. So again, I'll pause and see if there's any questions. Okay, yep. I see Anne has her hand up.
Thanks, Dave. Could you go back to the last slide?
Let's see.
Maybe, yeah. It was the one where you were equitable access to jobs, goods, housing. I'm wondering if you could add schools or education there in that line. It kind of goes back to some of the key trip functionalities that you identified in your trip analysis is why people are traveling. It's for work, for school, and I think I forgot the other third one, but I remember school was, I think, a key one. So
thank you. We can certainly do that. I appreciate that
adding
comment. Okay. So moving on, really bumping up the frequency on crossings. I believe Onward was at a quarter, when they recommend going up to an 1/8 mile. And then actually, having the city adopt engineering standards and, planning requirements for transit. So they become incorporated into city policy. You see the highlight here, the phrase diminishing priority for single occupancy vehicles. That's appears in a few of the upward policies. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. The addition of bus rapid transit service or high frequency transit service and evaluating those for arterials. I highlighted this because at the Mountain Line Advance last week, as they went through a variety of scenarios, and we all, kind of voted on how we would pay for different improvements. Should different funding levels be available? Bus rapid transit was not on the table. That was not one of the options voted upon. And, my opinion, and I can't say that I have a lot of analysis behind this, but bus rapid transit is really how you get, butts in the seat. And I think that we really need to look at that. I think high frequency transit is kind of marginal in terms of what the advance discussed. I think they were looking at mostly some 15, but mostly 20-minute frequency, which may not be high frequency by some definition. And then last on this page, this 15-minute connectivity, 15-minute neighborhood, again, is a term that comes up in a few of the policies. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions or comments. Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't find, can we go back to that last slide?
Yes.
Can you, I guess this last one say to require developing and redeveloping suburban areas to include, I guess, is it supposed to be development and redevelopment?
Yeah, I
we
can see that. So
require-
it's a required development and redevelopment in suburban areas to include multimodal facilities. I could see rewording that,
Okay, yeah, that was just a confusing,
Okay.
I think that's going to be, I guess I just feel really challenged by this from an implementation standpoint, because if goods and services aren't 15 minutes away, then how do we make that a requirement?
Yeah, I'm scribbling some notes here. Michelle, I think that's an excellent point. I think we can qualify that statement.
Okay.
But I appreciate it, because if we don't develop the land in a way that those are within 15 minutes, that's a standard that can't be reached.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to brainstorm language.
Appreciate that. Thank you. So city to eliminate parking minimums where access to jobs, goods, and services by other modes is adequate. That policy is more or less in place for the downtown, but this would make that broader in its application. Then this top one is really about those target areas. Again, that's Metro Plan's assessment in terms of where growth should be concentrated. The city and county in their regional plan will be doing, arguably a more robust set of scenario analyses, and may reach different conclusions. And then another policy that is quite a departure is to limit the expansion of low and mid-density development. That we, there's a lot of policies here on urbanization, and but this is kind of the corollary to that, to reduce the expansion of these types of developments. I'll pause there, see if there's any questions or comments. Yes, Anne.
So I mean, I understand how this regional plan, the RTP is putting in these sort of guideline principle of high-level policies that essentially the only way they would get encoded, or they're under the jurisdiction of the city, which that's through their own planning process, which is, my understanding is forthcoming with the update of the regional plan and then any translation into zoning. So I guess with this plan being proposed for adoption next year, how does that relate to the timing of the city's regional plan? Because is this going to be challenging for city partners through Metro Plan to be approving a document that says, you know, we're going to have a policy that says the city's going to limit, or city's going to do X or Y. So I'm just curious, maybe it's from the question from Michelle.
Yeah,
How,
if I may, I'll speak to that and then let Michelle answer, but
because it's
really,
confusing.
these are the upward policies. And the
Right.
upward policy is strictly if you want to pursue this path, these are policies you may wish to consider. Our formally adopted policy is the existing land use plan and the existing policies. So this is really an educational piece for the city and the county as they go into the regional plan process to look at these policies and look at these analyses and see if they would, if they want to incorporate them or how they may influence their own decisions. So I'll see if the city has any response to that.
I just want to thank Anne for that question, because it's a great question. I guess, Dave, I just want to maybe repeat what I think I'm hearing and how I think I understand what's happening here is that onward is the existing policies, and that's what's being kind of adopted as a policy document. Upward is an extension of that, but is more like best practices optional for achieving this upward. Do I have a kind of a clear understanding of what we're doing here?
I think that's fair. I'll give an example from the last plan where we said, here's our fiscally constrained plan and here's a program of projects. However, the Lone Tree Railroad overpass is beyond our fiscal ability, but here's its benefits if you wish to pursue it. And the city took that up to voters and pursued it. And now that's part of our fiscally constrained plan going forward. So here we are again saying, here's our fiscally constrained plan. There's a lot, if you want to do these other things, you can consider them. That's for your decision making, not ours, but here's our analysis.
And when we're talking about adoption, we're really talking about the TAC Executive Board adopting this, not council.
That's right.
So in a lot of ways, I think this is more, I guess I see it to Anne's point, yes. If we were adopting the upward, I think that would put us in a really weird position from a timing standpoint. And that's been some of the concern I've heard from some of my staff is just that, not the policies themselves, but the timing of everything, and one kind of forcing the other planning exercise to be put in a certain direction. This clarification helps, so I have, I think, less of a concern on that. And then Dave, I guess then the way I see this really acting as a document is it's informing the regional plan. Like TAC or the executive board would adopt it, and then that would really be kind of Metro Plan's position on how they would inform or maybe comment towards the regional plan.
I think that's a fair statement. This would be our starting point into the regional plan, and then kind of a benchmark as we help you evaluate the transportation impacts of the other scenarios that you would be looking at.
Cool, thank you.
And then Anne, you have another question or comment?
Yeah, it's just an observation about these high-level policies in here for upward. I'm seeing a lot of things that apply to the city limit or within the city, but this is a Metro Plan, which is larger. Your area jurisdiction is larger than the city limit. So I'm curious, and without going back to the list, there's considerations of also putting some more ties with county development and that fringe, what are we doing about the bedroom community aspects of what the county could potentially be doing as part of their own planning processes, and what are those recommendations through Upward?
That's
So anyway, that's just a comment, just you don't have to respond, but an observation I noticed.
I'll respond very briefly. If you look at the policy at the bottom of this screen, you see mountain line and city. And there are a number of policies throughout that say, city and county, city, county, mountain line, and ADOT. So we try to direct policies to respective agencies where we thought there was a clear role to play. And so moving on, well, that was the end of the policies. I did send out the full set of policies with the staff report, ordered a little bit differently, but we'll give the TAC here an opportunity to raise questions on any of those that they might have or make comments at this time.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Thanks. Dave, I'm wondering how these policies align with that slide that's earlier in your presentation that kind of talked about the three main categories that you're working on to address vehicle miles traveled. Is there a part in the report that kind of says these policies align with TDM, which seems to have a good benefit cost ratio? These policies align with the ped and bike investments, and these policies align with transit investment. And the reason I ask is I know they're mixed, but I don't see a ton of TDM type things in the policies.
Yeah, so that's an excellent observation. And in terms of what I presented on screen today, I did not present any of the TDM policies. And the TDM, in part because it's presented as at least being initially funded or funded to initialize that process, that TDM was not particularly controversial. It's something I think there was broad support for, so I did not present those today. There are some TDM, direct TDM policies. There are some policies as well that talk about, I don't think we call it the traffic impact analysis or transportation impact analysis process, but using VMT reduction in that analysis, as well as congestion management measures. As far as aligning these, that's something I think we have done and can do. I didn't point it out, but you see at the top of this slide, it says upward land use, community design. Earlier slides, it said upward transportation, and that's more about the investments. And then there was another group that said upward finance, which had more to do with finance. As far as splitting them out by, whether they're transit or ped and bike, that can certainly be tagged that way as well.
When I look at the whole thing, I'm sure it'll all come together. I was just trying to piece it together as I was watching your presentation, so thanks for that.
Okay, so at this point, we feel that the policies are in pretty good shape. We are certainly, welcoming refinements such as we discussed with Michelle earlier, but we're planning on moving forward as if these are where they need to be, with only minor adjustments going forward. So the next part of the presentation is just a quick overview of where we've been on public involvement. Again, we're pretty well wrapped up with our public involvement. The work before us is more of a technical nature, dotting i's, crossing t's. So we did a number of surveys. Here's the random sample survey on the left. You can see the groups that we heard from, about 674 people, 60% within the city. And then you can see the online surveys where we got a pretty good representation for the next two, dropped off significantly on the last one. But you can see how it skews. The online surveys, people tended to be more educated, wealthier, and predominantly in the city. You can see on the far right, we did intercept surveys at a couple community centers and at the Downtown Connection Center, where you can see a pretty importantly different population, more minority, far less wealthy. And so one of the things we'll do in our analysis is really look at from our random sample and online surveys, those demographic groups and how that compares with our intercept survey, and see if there's something that we can learn from our Title VI communities. We did go in person, several events out in the field, Earth Day, Bike Bazaar, Moves on the Square, Farmers Market, where we talked to 340 people. Mostly did an exercise asking them which strategies they would support personally or for the government to pursue. And then we had our virtual public meetings, as Miles referenced. I believe there were 54 people in total that attended those 3 events. We've engaged our stakeholders. We maintained a list of about 250 plus or minus people. People have come and gone, changed positions. We've been out to them at least 12 times through emails and surveyed them a couple times. We've been out to many commissions and organizations, a bunch in the spring. This fall, we kind of put it out there through our stakeholder and other meetings and a few communications. If you would like us to meet, please request it. We've had 3 commission meetings and we'll meet with 4 organizations. We have a couple more scheduled. And then Miles has had an advisory group advising him. And that group has met about 12 times, I believe, throughout the course of the process. We've been out on social media. This is old data. I apologize. I thought I'd had a more recent update than this. But again, kind of hundreds of people and thousands of impressions and people viewing the content. So our level of awareness has been high. And then we've put out 3 media releases, associated with things like surveys and such. So, presented to the board a while ago, even before some of these things had occurred, and they felt that we were achieving that standard of robust outreach. I'm pleased with what we've done. So as we move forward, we're really going to be rolling out technical papers over several meetings, so you'll have a chance to review those. And then towards the end, we'll kind of roll all those up. I think many of you have seen this done, where there's kind of working papers and then they get assembled into a final document and move towards adoption. So next month, I want to come to you with that public feedback and a high-level comparison to our policies. So, if we think we need high density, what's the public say about high density? Things like that. Much of which you've heard, but this will kind of bring it into focus. And then also to present our cost and revenues, our fiscal picture. 419 and 420 are really our operating principles. So for our fiscal constraint, So you're not going to see a lot new on costs and revenues for our onward plan. And then you can see the other things that will be coming to you. We want to remind you that we are working on the sustainability toolbox. Now that the model is working, Fair and Peers will assess the model's ability to analyze VMT from a variety of perspectives. And then we'll present us with a set of strategies that a VMT calculator might address, and we'll prioritize those for them. And then they'll build that toolbox, build that calculator. And then on the heels of that, we'll get into the regulatory discussion. So that's my presentation on Stride Forward, and I'll pause there and see if there's any final question. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And Madam Chair, I don't have anything else to share on this topic.
Great. Thank you both for the great presentation and discussion. We'll move on to item B, South Lone Tree Planning and Environmental Linkage Update. Mandia.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the TAC. Give me just a second here to share my screen. I have a short little presentation for you all. Great, and I think I just lost viewing, you guys. So can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Well, it's been a while since we have had a chance to talk about this project, so I'm going to start off with some reminders about this study. The purpose of this Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, or PEL, is to provide direction to the city about potential environmental impacts and mitigations to allow for the timely development of the future roadway expansion along South Lone Tree Road. And the PEL is a formal process that helps us to identify both the environmental and transportation issues. It develops the purpose and need for that future expansion, and it really streamlines the project development while reducing duplication in any of the following NEPA requirements. And the primary deliverable for this project is a PEL statement and checklist. And EnviroSystems Management, Inc. Was awarded the contract for this study, and they will be examining the area between Zuni Drive and JW Powell, which is about 900 feet of roadway, and are assessing 300 feet on either side of the road. And just for some clarity, the PEL will not provide any roadway designs. However, it will identify and establish the largest footprint, which will inform the future design of the road in the section of roadway. And that future design will be led by the city. And just a little bit more background on why this particular section of roadway. There's kind of two parts to that. First, there are several significant projects planned in the area that you're all very aware of, with the JW Powell expansion, Lone Tree widening in the overpass, the Juniper Point housing developments, and the other developments to come a little bit further east. And secondly, in 2020, the city placed an appropriations request or earmarks through Congressman O'Halloran's office for this project. And this project was submitted because it fit the parameters provided by O'Halloran's office, which at the time was about 10 million in appropriations and a possibility of local funding under Prop 419. And about a year ago, the city had received confirmation from O'Halloran's office that this project was a high priority for them regarding appropriation requests. So MetroPlan is conducting this PEL to really demonstrate progress should the opportunity to place an appropriation request arise again. Additionally, the study could potentially support other federal funding and grant opportunities. So before I move on any further, I'm just going to pause and see if there's any questions there, or if there's anything that Dave or Miles would like to add to that.
I would like to add a couple things at the end, when you're done, Mandia.
Excellent. And Anne, I see your hand up.
Yeah, you're referring to South Lone Tree, but I guess when I think of South Lone Tree project, I think of it coming essentially from wherever they're ending up with, up near Butler South, all the way down. So this is like a 900-foot stretch of road that you're clearing for Pell. So what's happening, which is great. I think it's a great start. It'll set us up for maybe some federal funding. But what's going on with the north of this to clear that, and how does that relate to what just this little area we're talking about from a planning perspective?
And I will pass that to Dave on that one, or Miles.
Actually, I'd like to jump in on that, and
Sure.
and Dave might have some stuff to add as well. There's a lot of history here, of course. And I want to go back actually 3 or 4 years, where MetroPlan initially did a lot of stakeholder interviews and came up with a vision for the entire Lone Tree corridor. And when we went into our first strategic advance as MetroPlan, we were not quite MetroPlan. The direction that we got was MetroPlan will support the efforts of the city in designing that corridor. So from a broad-based planning perspective, MetroPlan really took a step back to defer to the city and support the city's efforts. One of the ways that we are supporting the city's efforts is this study, because about 1.5 years ago, might be 2 years now, we MetroPlan, in collaboration with the city, and I think Mountain Lion was involved too, we looked at the possibility of a large, $40 million earmark or congressionally directed spending request. And as we went through all the numbers with city financial people, and we looked at what seemed to be viable in terms of a congressionally directed spending request, we pared everything back to this one section, so that we would have about an $8 to $10 million project request that we could pursue an earmark for. And one of the ways that MetroPlan, well, there's two things. The concern with this section is that while it's well defined and it's contained, and it's kind of the sweet spot for federal funding that we thought would be supported, we didn't have environmental work done. So MetroPlan volunteered essentially to do the work that Mandy is presenting now, so that we could be that much closer to a categorical exclusion being provided. And we knew going into this that FHWA was not going to say, oh, sure, you've got a categorical exclusion. I mean, the best they could do is say it looks promising. But we went through this effort, and that's the intention here, is to be able to submit a grant for an earmark and say, well, we don't yet have a categorical exclusion. We've done all this work and it looks very promising, and here's the documentation. So that's a lot of history. And does that answer your question, or was that TMI?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious why it was so you focused it only on this 900-foot stretch, because that's potentially the clearing area that you could qualify to get an earmark for a congressionally directed spending for around a $10 million project. Instead of clearing the entire Lone Tree, or doing some preliminary environmental clearance from wherever they ended up leaving construction to the north all the way south for the corridor. So instead of clearing the Lone Tree corridor, we just picked this one section. So I guess that's is that correct? We just didn't want to go further north. Okay.
That's correct. And a couple other things, and Jeff Bowman might want to jump in on this from the city perspective. The project wasn't initially federalized. So we broke out, a partitioned piece here that could be federalized, which would not federalize the rest of it, and therefore potentially slow down the city's efforts to design and build it the way they wanted to.
I understand that and how that works. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff or Dave. And Madam Chair, can I just see if Jeff Bowman or Dave Wessel have anything else they want to share by way of history?
Of course.
Nothing to add. I think you captured it very well.
Yeah, I agree. There's more details as you mentioned, but you've got it covered for today for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Every time I talk about this project, I just continue to learn more of the history. So it's so great. Thank you, guys. All right. So moving forward here. So here we have the study schedule. We are just getting started into the deliverables, starting with the existing and future conditions report, which we have received a rough draft of just this week. And in that draft, it's obviously still being modified and updated, but there were 3 environmental items that came up that will require future conversations with the city around potential mitigations. And I'll just bring that up here. The first one is the floodplain at Zuni and Lone Tree intersection. It currently sits in the 100-year floodplain with a small section apparently in the 500-year floodplain. The second item is the Bow and Arrow Wash, which is identified as a wildlife corridor. We will be meeting with Arizona Game and Fish hopefully next week to discuss that a little bit further. And then, of course, the recreational site of the Foots Trailhead and parking lot with the expansion or potential expansion of the roadway and any intersection improvements, for example, a roundabout, the Foots access would need to be realigned. So as part of the existing and future conditions report, EnviroSystems will be providing recommendations for future analyses and mitigation strategies for all 3 of those conditions. And of course, if any other conditions come up between now and then. And the next deliverable will be creating illustrative designs and cross sections for the study area that are based on, current and previous planning efforts and policies, and we'll assess, what can fit into this space and accommodate those mitigation strategies. So those will be presented sometime in the future with you all to discuss. And I believe that is all my update on this project. And Miles, I know you had some more to add to this. If you'd like to take it on.
I did, and I know there might still be questions, but Madam Chair and members of the TAC, I just wanted to recognize Mandia in this effort. I mean, we went into the history and all of the political and intergovernmental and financial machinations that have been going on for years. And through all of that, we landed on, here's something tangible that MetroPlan can do to help advance the project and position one of our member agencies to be more competitive at bringing in federal funding. So all that is set up, but then Mandia actually did all of the work that is resulting in us having this outcome and being able to document our project for federal funding. So thank you, Mandia, for bringing it all to fruition.
Of course.
And for the cat picture.
Yeah, 100%. Any other questions or comments out there? All righty, well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mandia. Thank you for all your work on that. Okay, we're going to move on to item C, SMART and Attain grant updates. Mr. Wessel.
Thank you. No presentation here, but just a discussion. So there are 2 federal grant opportunities, both due November 18th. The SMART grant I can dispense with quickly. That's the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation grant. This is a grant that's really looking for kind of bleeding edge technology. A prototype would be tested in phase one, and if it proved positively, then proved positive, then you could apply for, phase two to implement. NAU had a proposal and has since withdrawn that proposal, and we were going to submit it on their behalf. The Attain grant is the successor to the ATCMTD grant that we submitted last year. And as a quick overview, that was to extend the fiber optic line that is in Butler Avenue out Huntington and out 89 to Smoke Rise, to put detection and software in 89 that complements or reflects the same that's in the Butler corridor now, to develop timing plans for the full corridor that can be used by a responsive system, and then to cooperate with NAU on the evaluation of that system, including in that last year's grant, installation of TSP, transit signal priority, on, I believe, 8 buses and at 3 signals. This year's grant, a couple important changes. Last year was a 50-50 match. This year is an 80-20 match, so much more favorable. However, inflation has greatly influenced the cost of things. Fiber has gone up 58% in terms of an actual quote that the city received on a section of fiber. So we're inflating costs for fiber. We're inflating costs by about 17% for other components like detection in our proposal. We had a review by USDOT just yesterday morning, and just this morning. And basically what we learned was that the technology we're proposing, the responsive traffic management system, is not seen as innovative. It's, the purpose of this program is to take an innovative technology that is not being widely deployed and deploying it, spreading the word, and getting it out in the mainstream. They feel like this is one, a fairly mainstream technology, and two, the other concern was that it is so small in terms of the level of deployment that, kind of like a small sample in a random sample survey, your confidence level in terms of expressing the benefits is going to be relatively small. So to that end, going forward, our options are resubmit essentially the same grant. After doing some budget figures, we'd be in the same ballpark budget-wise with the 80-20 mix, do the same grant. Don't submit at all because we don't think it's competitive, or modify it. And I think we're going to have the conversation about whether to hit the submit button going forward. But in the meantime, we're modifying the grant. And this is what my recommendation is, that the TSP, the transit signal priority part, be taken out. And one thing that has changed is NAPTA no longer has the federal money available that they were going to put towards this. I think another important component is that transit signal priority has been around longer than the responsive traffic signal systems. And we're also doing a very small just test. So I think given the comments we've received, the TSP part is not particularly beneficial. The addition, this is to take what NAU is proposing for their SMART grant and incorporating that into the Attain grant. And what that is the use of existing technology, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi sniffers. I'm not sure if sniffers is the technical term, but kind of the common term, to detect and count pedestrians and bicycles. And then to take that information to develop the timing plans for the responsive system that would help address pedestrian delay. And just a quick background on responsive systems. They use the detection technology to count vehicles, determine the condition, and then based on that condition, it goes to a catalog of timing plans and says, this is the best one for the condition that's in place right now. And so the ped and bike sniffers, we'll just say the technology, Bluetooth sniffers, sounds a little less intrusive. The Bluetooth sniffers would then feed into that data stream. And now you had ped and bike information to say, oh, we have a sufficient threshold. We're going to put in a timing plan that's more favorable to ped and bike, given the conditions. There's other uses for that data as well that we think may be appealing to the reviewers. It can, safety is a big component of any transportation project and any grant. And being able to see exposure rates, meaning how many pedestrians and bicyclists are actually there and being exposed, is a vast improvement on safety measurement versus crashes per traffic volumes. And then the other thing, because these things would be positioned at several intersections, you can actually track travel patterns through an area. And that will help with capital programming. Where are people actually walking or riding their bikes? Is that the best place to make an infrastructure improvement? Or if they're avoiding a place where you would rather them go, you can then redirect infrastructure improvements there to help improve those traffic patterns. So there are another number of other comments that we think are readily addressed that we receive from USDOT. We believe that with that upgrade for the ped and bike may get us over the hump. It's in any event, the level of effort to revise the grant application is not great. We need to do a little update of the data. The financial tables are almost done as a result of just trying to figure all this out. So I think we can put this together pretty quickly. But I think it will be up to our board and the city as to whether or not we actually hit submit on this grant. Again, it's due the 18th. So, Madam Chair, I'll stop there. See if there's any reaction to this course of action.
Madam Chair, I have a comment.
Yes, please.
Thank you. What's that?
I'm getting used to you calling me Madam Chair, Jeff. Sorry.
Every day now.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave, for the overview. I see we have kind of real time. There's a meeting set up for Monday for kind of this core grant team to talk, and I think that'll be a good opportunity to continue this discussion. I mean, I think the city's committed to figuring out a grant application that puts our best foot forward. So I don't think your discussion today with USDOT is really helpful, and I don't think it deters us. At least I don't feel that way. Just helps us redirect, which is good. It's good to know.
Great, thank you.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to ask a question, particularly of Jeff Bowman, and it might just be a placeholder that we need to go into a bit later. But since we're in this meeting now and on this topic, I wanted to at least ask. So, okay, thank you. So, Jeff, my understanding from what Dave shared, and in a discussion I had with Dave this morning, is that the current signal technology, the hardware that we have, the software that we have on Butler, actually can be programmed in a way that it predicts different traffic conditions and can adjust signal timing. but that it hasn't yet been programmed or operationalized to take advantage of that full technology. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, we have a shortage of staff time, trained staff, and even field equipment is still just not quite. It's far from reliable enough to use the system to its full capability. We're kind of mismatched in our capabilities. The system is greater than current staffing and greater than the equipment in the field.
Okay, the system is greater than the current staffing and greater than the equipment in the field?
The system capabilities,
Uh-huh.
the foundational system capabilities are, it's much more capable than what we're taking advantage of today for those limitations that I listed. Is that a better way of saying that?
And then, so in order to take advantage of those capabilities, additional staff are needed to be able to program it and then manage it on an ongoing basis. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think as I've talked this through with Dave, I mean, my sense as MetroPlan is unless there's a way for MetroPlan to get funding to the city to be able to hire staff to do this, that I don't know that there's really a role for MetroPlan. It's a matter of deferring to the city to, prioritize it in your work schedule as seems appropriate to the city. Does that make sense? Do you see it that way, or am I missing something?
Miles, is that absent the grant? You don't see a role for MetroPlan?
Oh, well, I see us writing the grant because the grant, thank you for asking that, Dave. The grant could potentially, if we get it, could provide funding to get additional staffing, right, to do the work.
For a period, yes.
And so I still see us writing the grant, but if we don't get the grant, so absent the grant, yeah, I wonder if there's anything more for us to do.
I'm not sure there is, but I will say that I think we're kind of on the cusp of having some of these discussions at the city because there's an increased demand on many fronts, not just this front on transportation services. And so far, no commitment to resources. And it's partly because we haven't asked, but I think we're kind of on the cusp of having a lot of these conversations. So your role could be support for those conversations. That I don't know what that looks like exactly, but we'll know when we get there.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, we're going to move on to item D, Executive Board Agenda Review. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the TAC. I'm just going to scroll through this. It's up on your screen. The federal and state funding update, Dave and just gave some of it on the one grant. I will be letting the board know that we continue to make progress slowly but surely with increasing formula funding to this region. We have a meeting, the letter that was sent out by all of the Metropolitan Planning Associations requesting additional funding. It was sent to John Helikowski. I shared that letter at the last meeting. We actually have a follow-up meeting with Director Helikowski scheduled for November 21st. So we're going to continue to pursue that request. And Dave provided Stride Forward updates. We'll be sharing that information with the board. You can see item number C, we've already covered today. Item D for the board, we've covered today. And item E relates to bringing somebody from ADOT onto the Metro Plan Management Committee. You might recall this is an item that's in our work plan. to try to kind of increase our connectedness with ADOT. And other than that, I think that is all news that is news on the executive board agenda.
Okay, thanks for that update. We'll move on to item E, items from Metro Plan staff, with the first update being the Regional Strategic Transportation Safety Plan.
Dave,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll look to Miles on how we want to proceed with this. We can give you a quick update, or if there's any questions from this report. So there's a report just to kind of catch you all up on these things. And if any, I think my understanding was if you wanted to pull, you as TAC members wanted to pull any of these out for discussion, we could. Miles, if you'd rather we give a short blurb, I'm happy to do that as well.
yeah, thanks for that, Dave. If it's okay with the TAC, my sense is the information, brief updates in the staff report. If anybody wants to pull anything off and go deeper, we certainly can. And if that's not needed, then we don't have to.
Hi, this is Myrna. I see an ADOT rest area study update there and an ADOT local technical assistance program. I might be able to find to provide a little bit of information regarding those two if you'd like to hear them.
I would.
Okay. All right. In that case, okay, so for the ADOT local technical assistance program, so this is LTAP. I know that Metro Plan usually sets aside a certain amount of money for LTAP, and I'm thinking that maybe you're not utilizing it as much as you'd probably like. So what I'd like to offer is, since you just had that discussion about, city employees potentially not having the technical expertise, now that may be too much for LTAP, but they might be at least be able to provide with some recommendations where you can find those type of training. So training at azdot.gov would be the email you would email to find out some information. And like you said, there's the funding that you set aside for LTAP is also can be used to reimburse staff, Metro Plan staff, or member agency staff to be reimbursed for that training. So that's an option. I also can provide that email in the chat. In terms of the ADOT rest area study, so I also happen to be the project manager for that project. And we just held our second stakeholder meeting last week. And as part of that, I'll get to you in a minute, Dave. As part of that, we have the results of working paper number 2, which basically identifies deficiencies within the rest areas. We have identified as, Parks and Christensen, which were the 2 rest areas that are probably of interest to the region. We'll do what we can to keep those open at the very least for truck parking. So we're going to do some improvements to them, but because of how far gone those 2 rest areas are and the incredible amount of investment that it will take to open them to the general public, for now, we are going to just keep them open for truck parking only. Dave, do you have questions?
I just wanted to add a couple things. Myrna, thank you for that. So the LTAP program offers a wide variety of training opportunities. And I see the next item is future agenda items, and it may be valuable, I think, to have a brief presentation on the LTAP program to this body. But the training would be available to like public works staffs at the city and the county for flagging and reading plan reviews and stuff like that. And I believe there's also customizable training available. So if it was had to do with signal timing. If we could get a collection of other like-minded communities, LTAP may coordinate that training for us. So I'll work with Myrna to make that connection. As far as the rest area study, I'll just add this. The state is wrapping up their freight study. They were looking to direct about $5 million to this area, undefined. There was a great interest, at least by the Arizona Trucking Association, for improvements to truck parking. And that may be an opportunity to marry those two studies and look at improvements to those two rest areas that Myrna mentioned for truck area parking. So.
Right, and I am working with our freight group, which is run by Clem Lagaki on
Excellent.
that. Right, in fact, we presented to the State Transportation Board our recommendations for expansion, and Parks and Christensen were on that list.
Thank you, Myrna, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks. Should we move on to future agenda items, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay,
December 2022, that item is going to change because we're moving the board's consideration of adoption of the Stride Forward plan forward into the coming year. But we will have our Title VI training. And I think that's it. Oh,
Okay,
actually, I have one other thing, Madam Chair. And as the group might remember, there's a statewide initiative through the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council. Last year, it was $50 million. It was not funded. 2.6 million of that, if it had been funded, would have come to the Lone Tree Corridor. It's going to be advanced again in the coming year. And there's opportunity to affirm that the Lone Tree Corridor is where we want that money to go. And there's opportunity to identify another project. So at the November 16th TAC meeting, I'm going to open that up for discussion to see if anybody on the TAC and ultimately the board wants to move the funding request to another project. So thank you.
thank you. Okay, we are at the end of our meeting and we're going to move to closing business. Are there any items from the committee? Not sure.
Ann's hand is raised.
Michelle, this is Ann,
Yes.
yeah. I just wanted to see if, I had asked at the last TAC meeting if the TAC could get an update from Metro Plan on 2 work plan items, which were the, kind of the turnback study of Milton area. That was one, and then the other, and now I'm losing my train of thought. It was in the meeting minutes though, from that we approved. The West Route 66 planning study, kind of where those are sitting and what's Metro Plan's timeline and status on those.
Sure, I can just tell you briefly, Ann, and I do recall that request. Apologize that they're not here formally on this agenda. If they were formally on this agenda, they would say those 2 items are to a certain extent part of the Stride Forward plan. And when Stride Forward is done, then we build on it with those 2 efforts. So I don't have a lot to share. I will say that you also mentioned tribal communities transportation.
Route transfer.
Well, the route transfer, but also I thought last month you mentioned transportation to tribal communities. Is that not correct?
It could have been in a prior, but yeah, that is one of the related overlapping items with Mountain Line.
Yeah, so I am in discussions with Mountain Line, with Heather at your office about that. And it's looking like a lot of those discussions are going to happen after the elections happen, so we kind of know where the pieces fall.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, doesn't seem like anybody else has anything to add. So our next scheduled TAC meeting is November 16th at 1:30. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. I guess this, do we need to get, yeah, looks like Ann, you're about to do it.
So moved.
Okay. Can I get a second?
I second. This is Myrna.
Sounds good. Do we need to take a formal vote on that? I forget.
You can actually just say, unless there are objections, we're adjourned.
Okay, unless there's objections, we're adjourned. Everybody have a great evening.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you for
you.
sharing.